Good evening and welcome to the Church on the Hill for the fourth Future of Life and Faith program. We have had 3 great shows so far, and tonight I am sure will not let us down. If you have not had a chance to see any of the other ones, please go to our YouTube channel. They are there. A wonderful discussion featuring broad perspectives. Tonight, however, we are again joined by our host, Christopher Lydon, with our special guest, Father John Unni, who is for 17 years, is that right? 17 years? 19.
Getting old.
19 years, the pastor of Saint Cecilia Parish. So without further delay, if you gentlemen please come up, and let's hear what the two of you discuss about the future of life and faith.
This is our first Catholic piece of the story. Good evening, and I'm tickled again to be here with John Unni, who's a new friend, but a legend among so many people I know as the pastor of Saint Cecilia's. I knew about you from Kevin White and all sorts of other people, Catholics and non-Catholics, who hugely admire something very distinctive in that church, and we've got to figure out exactly what it is. I have this flyer from the church and the Rainbow Ministry, and I just want to read this sentence. The mission of this ministry says simply this: Saint Cecilia Church welcomes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Catholics to worship God and to speak openly and safely, and to embrace Jesus' call to unconditional love. We help LGBT Catholics seek reconciliation with the Church to enrich a spirit-filled life. My thought on reading that, as I said to you, John, was who could have written that but Jesus? It has the presence and the welcome and the affirmation that we know Jesus is and was, and yet it's so rare to hear that in a church document, especially a Catholic church document. As I've said here before, I was baptized originally by Cardinal Cushing at birth, a long, long time ago. But I have, once a Catholic, always a Catholic. My church came to be the 12th Baptist Church in Boston, which was something very different and very deep. I've said that's where I became a Christian. I baptized twice. The second one took. But the point is only, put it this way, to have a church without hang-ups around sex in a Catholic church, it would have been virtually impossible, inconceivable in the church I knew. Not to be continually fearful, guilty, puzzled, on the wrong side of something was impossible. And I wonder if you can just start there, how you came to that definition of yourselves, that ministry, and does Rome know about it? Does Rome know what you're doing?
I don't know if I know what I'm doing. Never mind Rome knowing what we're doing. First of all, absolute pleasure to be here, Colin. I'm so grateful for the invitation, and I would see.
I am too, Colin.
Yeah, it's such an honor. God, it's great. I'll see all of a sudden Colin will be in the pews once in a while, and he'll be waving. He's like, can't wait. And so I was feeling a little pressured today. It's just great to be with you. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you guys
I feel the same.
all coming. Here's a question to your question, which is very rabbinical, I guess, but why should it be any different than welcoming people?
Well, of course.
And we do have hang-ups. Trust me, this is not the perfect place by any stretch of the imagination, but we're trying to move in that direction.
But I have to say, so much of my education, and being Irish has something to do with it too, was just to be infinitely wary of anything that could be considered a sexual question. We didn't talk about it in my family, which was very broad-minded and open in lots of respects. Neither in our Catholic, what do we call it, CCD, you didn't talk about it with priests. You found a way to confess your sins in a way that was not untrue. But anyway, it was just a non-subject. The idea of welcoming unorthodox or unfamiliar kinds of people was just brand new, but so powerfully wonderful. I was going to ask you, everybody I know loves Saint Cecilia's of all stripes. What is the secret, so to speak?
I don't know. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but I will always focus on what we're not doing right, should be doing, or I'll pay attention to that one letter that comes and not the 99 positive affirmations, you know, because you want to try to do the right thing. But I don't know. I think it's just, you try to be authentic, just be yourself, be real. Kevin, we were talking earlier right before we came out, just be you. And I think that's what we try to do, and try to accept people who are just being them.
Well, among Catholics or former Catholics that I know, the Park Street Church, what's the name of the church on Park Street?
Park Street. Oh, the Paulus Center?
The Paulus Center has been a kind of refuge for liberal-minded Catholics or not rigidly Orthodox. But Saint Cecilia is that plus an air of community, an air of Christian love, fellowship, openness, to an even higher degree, it seems to me.
I don't know. I just don't. I haven't kind of looked around to compare, but you just get busy about what you think you should be about and how you think you should be, and try to do it.
But how did you define that, specifically outreach to LGBTQ people and former Catholics or estranged Catholics or whatnot?
So I want to say somewhere around 11 years ago, the Jesuit Urban Center closed. That was staffed on Harrison Ave there in the south end.
Yep.
And that community, some were just going to take off. Others were looking for another place to kind of worship. And we just said, you have a place here. And they were talking about, maybe we'll have mass down in the basement. We'll worship down in the basement. And I was like, no, why don't you just be part of the whole rest of the community?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was some fears that folks were going to lose their identity as to who they were as LGBTQ. And I was like, no. And what happened was it was like leaven for the dough when they came over. We were St. Anne University Parish, where I was pastor, and then Saint Cecilia. And at St. Anne's, I'd have Tivas on, and
St. Anne's on
in Gainsborough, in Northeastern.
by Symphony Hall.
Yes, exactly. And I'd be like really informal under the robe and whatnot. And then I came over to Saint Cecilia, and everybody was in blue blazers. And I thought, geez, this is two radically different communities. Both would strongly say, hey, we're a Catholic church, just coming from the different perspectives. And it was a little bit of like Saint Water and Saint Oil, and trying to do the mix. And then when the Jesuit Urban Center came over, predominantly a gay community, again, leaven for the dough, and the whole community rose. And just by accepting people and welcoming people for who they were. And it's been forward and upward ever since.
Of course, from the church's standpoint, those populations were simply just way outside the tent. But how do those constituencies, gay people, lesbian people, how do they see it? Do they obviously they don't walk around eternally thinking, I'm a sinner.
I hope not.
But I mean, why do they come? What are they looking for? How is it, and why not I don't know, I find it wonderful that people migrate back to the Catholic Church for something special, something different.
I think at St. Cecilia there's a sense of community, first of all. And we're all looking for community, right? We're all looking for connection. And look at these last 2 years. I mean, for God's sakes, it's been brutal. And people have been isolated. And so even now, post-COVID, we're not fully out of it, obviously, but people are just yearning to come back. So there's a sense of community. I think there's also a sense of like, hey, you're recognized for your gifts and you have something to share. And some people are really looking for community. Other people want to just be like, hey, listen, I come to pray and it's my hour kind of in the week where I'm quiet. And other folks, I think they look for an opportunity to serve. So there are like 30 different ministries to be involved in.
Like what?
It could be everything from liturgical stuff, lectors, greeters, Eucharistic ministers, all that kind of stuff. But then there's like our hunger and homelessness ministry. Mark Lippold coordinates that. So we go around all the different places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and take all the food and then get it down to Catholic Charities and to the Haitian Multi-Service Center in Dorchester. We have the Rainbow Ministry for the LGBTQ community. There's a knitting group, there's a prayer group, there's young adults, there's all this kind of stuff that goes on. So people look for that.
The LGBT group has, what, monthly or whatever, meetings with guest speakers and
Yes,
that
great,
kind of-
great guest speakers.
where does that go?
It provides I think a safe place for people to gather and be able to talk about things with no shame and no guilt. You know, you were talking about sexuality earlier. I don't think the Catholic Church has the corner on the market. They got a pretty good market share, but I mean, you know, so often, like with just with religion and sexuality and all of this kind of stuff, you know, there's all of this shame and guilt, and to be able to come together, know like whoever you are, there's a welcome place here, and it's the guest speakers that they get are just compelling.
I'm embarrassed to say, John, I meant to go to Mass at Saint Cecilia's before we did this gig, and I haven't got there yet. But would I recognize...
No guilt, Chris.
Thank you. But would I recognize the Catholic Mass? I was an altar boy in the Vatican II Latin Mass, and I can still do the whole thing, beginning to end. But would I recognize that Mass, Introibo ad altare Dei, that beginning?
No, not at Saint Cecilia. Yeah. I mean, now there's a wonderful priest in our midst here today who I have great respect and affection for, Doc Conway. He's the pastor of St. Ambrose and St. Peter's and the Dorchester Collaborative. And Doc's, what are you, 84, 85? 84. So Doc would know a lot of that Latin, Chris. Me, I don't know anything. I know illegitimi non carborundum. That's about
Don't let
it.
the bastards
Don't let
get
the
you
son
down.
of a guns get you down, right?
Yeah. So what does the Mass sound like?
It's very upbeat. It's welcoming. It's warm. It's user friendly in the sense of the songs. Hopefully the homilies are relatable and relevant and inspirational.
You give a sermon every Sunday?
Oh yeah, yeah.
How long is the sermon?
Too long for most.
No, a 12th Baptist.
I was going to say I belong to the 12th Baptist Church probably.
That's a 1-hour sermon.
Yeah. All right.
To begin with.
I could go. They're usually 20. Sometimes they go 25, and sometimes they've gone longer. And Catholic Church people are not used to that. The Mass
Right.
is supposed to be 45 minutes, which never ever happens at Saint Cecilia. But
Oh, that's
no.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
So Kevin White was a good friend of mine, and he was devoted as Catherine was
Catherine,
too.
I loved her. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that happen, and what did he make of it? I mean, he was a man of the old school.
Yes. So I didn't know Kevin as. I mean, you knew him as Mayor White, obviously. I did.
I'm the mayor.
Yeah.
I'm the mayor.
Shitty
How are ya?
Boston. But Catherine I get to know extensively, and she was just a great gift, and it was through the last years of his life, and so we had the funeral at Saint Cecilia, which was a real privilege,
Right.
real honor.
Barney Frank spoke.
Yeah, he was hilarious. But so I was always I'm nervous, when the politicians come and the bishops are there. That's when I'm like, ruh-roh, this could be it for me.
You did something great for Kevin. Can I tell you one quick Kevin
Please.
White story? We lived around the corner. I used to live 2 doors away from him when he was mayor. We had endless talks. He was fond of my wife. He introduced me to my wife. But toward the end, Catherine or one of the kids or somebody would walk him around the neighborhood. And I found out the way to get his attention was to say, "Mr. Mayor!" And, whatever it was just disappeared. He was himself again for about 15 seconds. How are ya? And, I'm the mayor and all that sort of stuff. And then he would start remembering things or misremembering things. But the last time I saw him, he did a sort of trail, and God knows where he was going. But at the end, he just said, "I love you." And I thought, praise God for a happy dementia or whatever it was. But he had discovered a kind of, he wouldn't have said that 30 years earlier.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And that had to be something to do with, with your version of the gospel.
You hope, God. You know, who knows as we age, it's tough enough where the body goes, but where the mind and spirit goes. But you hope whatever ggets lost, that you can retain those words. I love you, and that is the gospel.
Yeah. And he said it. He said it with feeling. So much ground we want to cover, and then we want to get in questions here too. But go back to the sexual issues. Two things we have to touch on: is the damage of the abuse scandals done, and can you assess, that history in terms of the modern impact in Ireland? And one of my brothers lived there to the end. The church has almost disappeared under the abuse scandals. But what's the score on all of that now? Are we through it? Are you still feeling an impact?
So anything I say is just my opinion. So I don't know if it's actual or accurate. What I have seen in the last 20 years, some people totally left. Others have slowly come back. Others didn't leave, but slogged it out, wanted to talk about it and all this different stuff. Voice of the Faithful was formed, so much along on those lines. But what I've seen is the younger generation, I can't believe I'm saying that, but the younger generation, and that could be 30s to 40s, they grew up Catholic, they went to, back in the day, we'd call it CCD, religious ed, all this kind of stuff, certainly baptized, but they're not getting married in the church, they're not having their kids baptized, and it's not with any, seemingly any anger, or, it's just, it atrophied. If you don't use it, you lose it. It died out, and so they're not interested. Now, they're also not interested in a lot of organized politics, institutions and all that. It's a very interesting time, but what I've seen at Saint Cecilia, and in many other parishes in the diocese, is try to bring people in. And I think if you're relevant and you're welcoming and you can speak to people's hearts and spirits, you're going to slowly draw people. But there's been a huge drop-off. I mean, look at the diocese where they're calling them collaboratives, trying to put two places together, one guy. There's a limited bench from which to choose, too. So, still unmarried clergy, so celibacy, and that's not the big draw. That's not going to be like, oh, they're going to be beating down the doors to join, with celibacy, as their pre-requirement there. And then, women can't be ordained, and married clergy. So, I mean, it's like a very limited pool, so there aren't people, so they're collaboratives, clustering, which actually ends up being a cluster lots of times. Little play on words there, and so it's just it's tough. And then if you get somebody in the sales force who's not particularly bent towards sales, I'm trying to be a little humorous in this, but it might be better for a classroom, might be better for wherever. That makes it tough for people too.
Well, the general rubric around these conversations these last several weeks has been a sort of mostly Protestant churches, but in the general understanding that attendance is down, interest is down, churches are not what they were. The Catholic Church strikes me as even more so in the sense that so many parochial schools have closed, and I mean the presence, the star quality of the diocese in general seems to be down. On the other hand, something's resurging too. I mean, how do you see yourself in terms of a rebuilding pattern and the prospect of active church life and faith too in our town? So
at Saint Cecilia, I don't know, something's happened. I'm a big believer in the Spirit, and I think the Spirit is at work, which is not to say it's not at work in other places. I don't know. When things go well, you always attribute it, oh, thank you, God. When things go poorly, you're like, you doing this to me? And so I don't think it's that kind of thing, but I always just feel like it's of the Spirit. So something's happening there, people in pews. But what happened during the pandemic was that we immediately went to the live stream, and it has taken off over the last 2 years. And so now we have at the triple F, the far-flung flock. I got to be careful. Far-flung flock. And so people are kind of tuning in, which has really been unexpected and beautiful. So I think that's one thing that we have to look at church-wise. However, what's the old commercial? There's a Coke or Pepsi. There's nothing like the real thing, baby. Remember that little jingle?
Yeah.
And it's in-person presence. You know what I mean? That where we're fed in community, and so you never want that to substitute. At least I don't. But we have more people now participating virtually who never would have even gone to church pre-pandemic. So that's a good thing. And then slowly, maybe we can work to people to be getting involved in their own communities. Not looking to make Saint Cecilia like Mecca. Find your own community, and and hopefully the folks in ministry will be engaging enough.
I associate the people in this church tonight are, a lot of them, the first conversation we had was with Nancy Taylor, but I've met a number of others who no question, are building churches in Boston right now. Which ones do you learn from? Which ones do you know about? What's going on in this period? What's working? From casting yourself as the salesman again.
I don't know. First of all, I think with liturgies and worship, like a relevant message, a timely message, something that's inspiring, that speaks to the heart, but also engages the intellect. To just go into any church, synagogue, or mosque and hear somebody like recite the scriptures or the readings, and just have them regurgitate. I mean, it's insipid, it's dull, and it doesn't engage in it. So that would be one thing. I think those opportunities for service. I know Nancy Taylor is just, I respect her immensely. I think she's retiring, I think, right?
She is.
Yeah.
Is she here tonight?
Not here.
Maybe not. She's been here for most of them, and she had a terrific testimony of her own. But what do you see her doing that's working? What is it?
Well, I don't know, because I'm always busy on Sundays too. But I know of her, and I probably one of the regrets I have is that I didn't get to know her more deeply personally. And same thing with some of the other churches around in the South End. The MLK breakfast every year with Saint Cyprian's, and then on West Newton there. Oh my God.
On West Newton Street. I'm not sure. Not St. Cyprian's.
No, not Saint Cyprian's. It's Union United Methodist. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So those guys are doing great stuff, but like there's not a lot of interaction all the time, because I think I can only speak for myself. Everybody's just so busy with their own, tending their own corner of the garden, so to speak.
But part of what I'm wondering, and it applies to me too, we're in a very, very strange time. I mean, I don't remember disconnection of politics, community life, economics, conversation, media. It seems to be going off in so many weird directions that aren't related. And we're also in a pandemic time and a climate time, political scandal time in certain ways, and now wartime. But if there was a time to go back to church, this would be it in a certain way. But I mean, how does Catholicism speak to what can feel like a time of breakdown, intellectual breakdown, spiritual breakdown, political breakdown, civility breakdown, health breakdown, confidence breakdown? I don't want to overdo it, but it's a very, very strange time in our lives. What is the church saying? How is the church addressing this perplexity?
So I can't speak for anybody else. I'm gonna go to the top first
Please.
of all. I love this Pope. I think, you know, what he has brought in, first of all, in the words of a proper Bostonian, he's wicked smart. He's a Jesuit. You know what I mean? This guy is bright beyond belief. But he's real. He doesn't have a stellar, perfect, pure track record. You know, he admits his mistakes when he was younger, and you know, when he was a superior, and what he did and didn't do, and down in Argentina. And then I love the non-judgmentalism that he brings. You know, like who am I to judge? And we just judge one another on so many different levels. Never mind with issues of sexuality and orientation, but just in general. You know, he challenges people, especially in my line of work, to not be clerical. You know, you're taught either implicitly or explicitly that we're men set apart, right? And I mean, that's not my vision of Jesus. He was right in the messy mix of things, and so I think the church should be in the messy mix of things, and not just be over here. Look at our news feeds or whatever. You're far right, the far left, and they have the loudest voices, and you know they seem to comment. This is my experience anyway. I don't know if anybody agrees, but and I'm like, say that's 5%, or 10%. What about the 90 or 80% in the middle? Whether you swing left or swing right, like who kind of speaks to us? You know, where can there be like a rational discourse? But it seems like, you know, folks are out there, and I think the church should not be out there. You know, look at the big thing that happened this past week. You know, with the leaking of the Roe v. Wade opinion, right? And you know, and then so you hear clearly here and clearly here, but like, what about in the messy mix where you're trying to figure this out and work it through? I think the church should be in the middle of that, not meddling, but accompanying, walking with people as they try to figure it out and deal with the struggles of yes, that particular issue, but all the different issues. So I think from the top down, this Pope, and I'm biased, I don't know why, I've never met the guy, and I love him, and I like what he's about, I like what I've read from him, and so that's one thing. Not everybody agrees. Some would see him as the Antichrist, you know, like, oh, this aberration, let's go, he's not going to be in here for too much longer, and then we can kind of right the ship, no pun intended, you know, and get back to the good old days. And that thing to me is dangerous. And it's as equally dangerous if somebody comes in like, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm going to just do this whole new thing. And, you know, there's always going to be this healthy tension, I think, of, you know, conservatives, right? The traditions and what we believe and the foundations, but also the liber, the liberating, the liberation, freeing people. Like Jesus freed people from the rules and the regs and the law. He didn't throw them out and say, this is anarchy central. He says, I haven't come to abolish the law. I've come to fulfill it. So it's a both and. It's a healthy tension there. And I see the Pope modeling things in that way. Again, not everybody does. And then on the grassroots level here in the parishes, you see people who kind of get that, judge less, love more, meet people where they're at, accompany, and go forward. Sounds easier said than done, right? So.
Right. John, I want to touch on the last of the sexual or sex things in the Roe versus Wade, and what you're saying about it. Take that as an example, though, of speaking to a divided, a very puzzled world. I mean, what do you say about Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court case, and the overturning of Roe versus Wade? What do your parishioners ask you? How does this work as an issue on your schedule?
You know, last Sunday, I just kind of dipped my toe into the water a little bit, not too much, but it was more like asking the questions. How do we deal with this? You know, and if it goes in this direction or that direction, whatever happens, like, and it causes all of us to start to say, what do I think? What do I feel? You know, what has been my experience? You know, and some would say that Joan Vanocchi wrote an article just the other day that it's a big victory for the Catholic Church, or they finally got their way, or something along those lines. And I read it, and I was just like, that is the perception, right? Some of the main drivers, and the evangelical Protestant churches, the main drivers. And then I read something like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't read something. And so you have that thinking that's there, but then you have all these regular, everyday people who are wrestling with, again, the messiness of the issue and where, how to deal with it. And I said to some people, if it does, I middled 75 times. I ended with, I am not for abortion. To be clear, one time I mentioned it, and some lady wrote in, he's pro-abortion. You know what I mean? I'm like, where did you hear that? And I'm adopted, for God's sakes. I'm so grateful that I have life. You know what I mean? Granted, abortion wasn't legal back in the day, but is that to say it wasn't happening? Right. And so some of the wonderings today, like, so if this is repealed, do the political charlatans go out there and say, like, okay, great, we've wiped it out in the country, or we've lessened it and stuff like that? It's like Play-Doh in our hands. Remember when we were kids and you squeeze it and then it squeezes out somewhere? It's gonna happen, but like, how does it happen? Who gets affected? Primarily, I think it's going to be women who are poor, the BIPOC community, women of color. People who have to go like all over the place to fight and to have it. And again, this is somebody I'm not for it. But what happens? Where are the deeper conversations as to how to deal with this issue? Here's another quick thing. Look at immigration. And I took heat from this again from certain folks, but not so much in our congregation, but immigration. Do you remember? I would say to people, like, I don't think you can have it be all the entrance free, like just free come in from every place. At the same time, between walls, cages, separating people, this horrific stuff, can we not find a more thoughtful and educated and effective and humane solution to the problem of the immigration issues in our country? But no, it's, again, either this draconian measure over here or anything goes over here. And I think that's kind of the thinking, whether it's abortion, immigration, just so many of the bigger issues.
I'm thrilled to hear you say that, because like you, I don't like abortion in any way. I come to recoil from the advocates on both sides. Anybody that wants to simplify that issue has never been close to it. It's a deeply, I think it has, my own personal opinion would be, it must be a woman's decision in the end. At the same time, anybody who makes it a simple, I have a right to do anything or whatever, is missing the point, I think. But, and in each individual case that a priest or a counselor would confront, I would think it would always be terribly complicated. Terribly,
oh my God.
Terribly.
So listen, being in just in my role, in very broad terms, when you listen to someone, listen to a woman who has gone through that, nobody makes that decision lightly.
Exactly.
Then
That's the whole point.
If it is made lightly, and it's never lightly, but like under pressure, duress, or it was thinking, or it would have changed. Let me tell you, the conversation, what people carry, not just guilt, but just grief, and there's so much.
Amen.
So I see my role, our roles as ministers, priests, rabbis, anyone in ministry, as accompanying somebody. You're not condoning or condemning in that moment. You're accompanying pastorally that person, so that hopefully there's redemption. We come from that. Every encounter with Jesus, if you ask me, ends in redemption, not with a head chopped off, a hand chopped off, a scarlet letter, and being shamed and booted from the community, which is what organizations and institutions do, right? So you look at the woman at the well with Jesus, or the woman caught in the act of adultery. After they're going to chuck all these rocks, he basically, hey, first one who's never messed up, never screwed up, you throw the first rock. They all drop. We know the story, right? They all take off, right? And then, boom, has nobody condemned you? And she looks around, no one, in great shame, and he goes, neither do I. Now, avoid this sin. Go and sin no more. In other words, you might want to look at this. There's always an opportunity for that new and second chance. That's why the cancel culture is the antithesis of what Jesus is about. One and done, screwed up and you're out. No. It's always about redemption, reconciliation, healing, rupture and repair. Isn't that what friendships, marriages, sibling relationships are all about? Rupture and repair, rupture and repair. You know? So that's one thing. The other thing I was thinking, Chris, was say you're accompanying somebody in let's say, our role, ministerial roles, and you're not judging, you're just accompanying, even though you find what happened to be awful, an abortion, or I killed somebody, or well, anything along these lines, or you're a military chaplain, and your war is abhorrent to you, and yet you find yourself accompanying people in the service, pastorally responding and accompanying them. Like, you take on a less, it just happens, I think, in my old age, I'm starting to see this, you take on less of a judgmental persona and accompaniment, and you just walk with and be with people as they're working their stuff through. Right. And we move to this new place, another place. And some would say, like, well, that's a cop-out. You know, you have to be part of the culture war, and you have to be for or against. And you know, I'm glad you're so sure and certain about all these things, you know. And again, I have my position with what we're just saying. I'm not for it, but how you be with it.
You know, it's so people here remember Andrea Campbell in John's chair, running for Attorney General, ran for mayor, city council, but I'm still kind of recovering. It was so beautiful to hear her speak of campaigning, and wherever she goes, and she goes to a lot of churches, but she feels people coming to her in distress, in struggle, she said. And I thought that is a real gift, not to see, you know, anything, to get a subtle message that I'm struggling with something. And not that she can solve them on the campaign fly, but anyway, I was just impressed, and I'm impressed to hear you talk about it, John. You have a gift. But I wanted to go back also to the beginning. How did John Unni get to be John Unni, and how did it develop? I can tell from your speech that you're one of our own Bostonians.
I'm a suburban kid, which is funny. I don't know how I get I don't even think you have an accent, but my friends, we all kind of talk the same way. And then half the kids that grew up in Dorchester and Southie, they don't have that, and I'm like, I don't know what happened, but it's not as bad as the North End kids.
Tell us your story, the story of John Unni.
Grew up in
You said adopted.
I was adopted, yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah, it's quite a little story. I don't want to bore everybody, but I'll give you the cliff notes. I was adopted as a beautiful family. My dad was from the city, from Rosendale, and you know, the old West End and Roxbury, and my mom was from southern Maine, so country girl, city boy, trying to have kids, early 60s, and 9 years went by, and they were waiting for like Catholic Charities, didn't happen. And there was this order of nuns up in Maine, and they're like, we got one for you, you know, type of deal. And so it kind of happened, and then, you know, I guess not an uncommon thing. 3 years later, I was like John the Baptist. I prepared the way. Then my brother Joey came, and then Paul came. So, you know, the three of us, and it was great. And so, you know, they lived in Maine for a little, lived here for a little, and they settled in North Reading, in Midland. So that's where we grew up. A great way to grow up. It was the 70s. We were in the city a lot because of my dad's side of the family. And then
What brought you to the priesthood?
Well, I went to college. I thought I was going to be a doc, and I was 17. I grew what I thought was a beard. The drinking age was 18 up in Vermont, and I thought it was a beard. It was really just a chin strap. I was a trendsetter before they were even in, you know, because I couldn't grow anything on the upper lip there. And I used my friend's ID to get into the prayer meetings at night there, and we had a few good times. So I never went to pre-med. That first semester was a disaster academically, and my mother was not too pleased. And I tried to use the line like, I'm paying for this. I'm landscaping every summer, you know. And she goes, I don't care if you're paying for it. You're not going to do this. You know, my mother, she was this tall, but she was a force. You know what I mean? She kept us in line, which was a beautiful thing. My dad died when I was 16, Joey was 13, Paul was 9, so She really.
Was the family religious, and were you Catholics?
You know, we went to church, but it wasn't every single Sunday, but it was pretty frequent. You know, I was never an altar boy or went to Catholic school, but this Jesus God stuff is as real to me as talking to you. Like, I am a believer. I talk with him. You don't hear a voice. You don't see a vision. I am God. Jesus is real to me as we are. So I've always had that, and I don't know, that I feel is a gift from God.
But from reading, from your parents, from...
It literally just sounds corny. It came from the inside out. I know that's not a good explanation. Even as a little kid, I knew, I believed in God. I knew there was a God. I don't know. Yeah.
And when did you feel a vocation, as we used to say?
So I got out of college, so from the bio pre-med, and then I'm like, oh, business, nah, I didn't like stats. At least become an English major so you can communicate and write. So I did that. I taught high school, and it was a beautiful relationship, and I was making no money teaching. I taught at Christopher Columbus High School in North End, which is now gazillion-dollar condos, and I was making 10 grand a year, 10,527, and I'll do the math for you. It was $150 a week. And you get paid every 2 weeks, $300. And so I was teaching.
Christopher Columbus, that was a Catholic school.
Yeah, the Franciscans ran it. And it was great, just a great place.
Class of 65.
Come on, really? Look at that. That's great. I loved it. I loved Columbus. You know, like Don Bosco, Don Savio, all the Columbus. And so I taught there, and I had the landscape to make supplement my income. And that's when, at 21. I was thinking to myself, how can you make more money shoveling bark mulch, 5 yards of bark mulch in like 5 hours, and make more money doing that than trying to mold the minds of the future teaching English? You know, I knew something was off. Anyway, I was coming to this place, early 20s now, and relationship and marriage, what's happening, and yet the priest thing, it kept kind of coming up. And again, I didn't have I wasn't going down that alley, and it was real. So it was a whole process. It's like landing a plane. You don't just decide. The plane has to hit ground, and come to us. So it was that process. My girlfriend and the relationship, applying to the seminary. Is this real? Am I running away from something? Is this nuts? Or am I nuts? And then getting accepted. So and then the plane takes off again. So it was a couple of years, and then I went through the seminary and.
St. John's.
St. John's, yep. And I actually had a good experience, but not an easy experience, if that makes any sense. Not academically, but fitting in. And I think that was probably one of the concerns that some of the professors might have had, like, is this kid going to make it? Is he going to make it? And so 2 months from ordination, 5 years into this, I was an undiagnosed ADHD guy, so I was always late. I never got my papers in on time. My language was salty, all these different things. And I would wear a shirt and tie, not out of defiance, but like I was like, oh, the priest will wear the collar. You know what I mean? I'll put that on afterwards. Like, if you become a cop or a doctor, you put on the uniform afterwards. And, I don't know if that was sending out signals like, he might not be really ready here. And so I didn't get the vote 2 months before. Maybe like 4 months before.
You didn't get the vote.
To move on to get ordained.
Who cast the votes?
The faculty.
Wow.
I missed it by 1.
Wow.
So, horseshoes and hand grenades. Close, but knows the guy. So, there was a lot of discernment, and I was incredulous at the moment. And then I had some phenomenal support around me, and again, accompaniment of priests and faculty members. And I knew I had the vote the next week when they re-voted, but I, at that point, and I'm a four-wheel drive guy, I put it in neutral. And I was like, is this a sign after all this? Like, why couldn't you have told me in year 1? That was my thinking at the time, I had to go through all this for 5 years. The best years of my 20s gone. And yet, again, I don't even think God operates that way. It's just one of those things. And you know what? In retrospect, in hindsight, I did need to mature. And not like, you're immature, grow up, but more like a pear on a tree or an apple. You want to keep it on the vine as long as you can, and then it's ripe. And so that was a pivotal experience. And I went into a parish up in Wakefield for my deacon year, where the rest of my class got ordained. And it was like an internship, and it really changed me.
Before you were ordained, or had you been ordained?
I had not been. And then that following year, after having a pastoral
Okay.
year, it was maturity, but it was just good. And I got it, and then I went to the only place I didn't want to go was this one particular church in Dorchester. And guess where I was assigned? And
It's about very good church.
right? It was
What church
St.
was it?
William's. We talked about it earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And
The greatest drum and bugle corps.
Don being
In
cool,
the world,
right?
yeah.
Everything,
Best band.
right? The best band. And I won't get into why I didn't want to go there. It was like, it was modern, right? And there was St. Margaret's was right next door, you know. And you know what? I ended up going, and it was monumental. It was pivotal. And Rosemary, we met, and I give thanks to God this day. And it was the best experience, first parish in Savin Hill, and I loved it. And then it was just from there.
John, this is fascinating. I should be calling you Father.
Oh, please.
Unni.
No.
But
Okay, Mr. Light.
no, I feel your energy. I feel your conviction. I feel your openness and your readiness, and it's a very powerful thing. And I will be at Saint Cecilia's one Sunday very soon. But I'm just wondering. I mean, when did you're improvising and sort of freelancing all the way? When did you figure out this is it? This is right, and it's working.
You know, in life,
And what was it that was working?
yeah, in life, the things that we least expect, that can be the worst things that happen to us, end up being those pivotal moments that shift us and change us. And I think, literally, not getting the vote, I don't have one sour note, one resentment. It shifted me and changed me. And then I knew, like, this is real for me. And so 30 plus years later, I think 30, this year is 30 years being ordained. It's as real and new and vibrant and alive and
Praise
fulfilling.
God Almighty.
In fact, even more so. And I don't know, you know, if you could say that in marriage, that marriage is working. Most of us, I feel like, oh, we're enduring each other, you know. And same thing in this, like, and just like in anything, if we're teaching or landscaping or whatever, like, you get tired of, like, it's good. I'm so grateful, and I really feel it's my calling. You know, I don't feel it's a job. It feels like a calling. And I never feel like I've made it or we've made it at a particular parish. Everything's a new journey. Now, I don't wake up every single day saying, oh, thank you, God, a new day. And I'm like, oh, God, I got to do this and do that sometimes. And, well, you're tired, like all of us, you know. But it feels legit in that way. And as strong, if not stronger now than in the beginning.
Oh,
I know that sounds
you're
corny,
blessed.
but it's
No, you're blessed. We're all blessed.
it's a blessing. Yeah.
I want to give time for people to ask questions, but I just have one more general one, and it's so obvious. But I mean, I asked you, does Rome know what you're doing? Does Lake Street know what you're doing? You are a free spirit in a very, very traditional institution. Where are you reminded of that? And also, when it comes back eventually to doctrine, what's your authority? Not only about belief, but also about, dare I say, dogma. What is your? How does your energy, your free energy, work in that institution?
So,
And how many? I don't know of other priests. Never heard of priests talk the way you do.
well, they're out there. There's one in here tonight, Doc
Good.
Conway. He's right there, and like I said, 84. But you know, another guy that I just look up to and respect him, as I have great affection for. But who's the real deal with stuff and can speak honestly. There are always going to be like repercussions if you're too honest. Somebody's going to call you on something. But speaking of the Spirit, like I feel like if our own individual spirits are aligned with the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, like Like I say like, hey, keep me in line. Like I want you to inspire me. I don't want this to be John Unni stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to say to her, help me to understand things deeply. I don't want to misinterpret what's going on. So I do that. And so I know that with the intention with which I go into stuff. And so I will always be open to being called on that. Like, oh God, as long as people know my intention. But there are some people who are not interested in it. You said this, you're out, and again, it's the antithesis of how Jesus was. And people in church do that. Lake Street is no longer, by the way. It's, the Cardinal is right down the street at the cathedral. And so he's the neighboring parish, if you will. And
Shows you how long I've
yeah. No, that all got sold, and he moved, and he lives in very humble quarters, and I have great affection for him and respect for him. And when we had this thing 11 years ago with the Jesuit Urban Center coming, I remember he said to me like, you can't change church teaching. And I remember saying, I'm not changing church teaching. And I think he wanted insurance, like, and I'm trying to navigate. And they were roiling waters. They were muddy waters, like, just trying to welcome people, And he, in his very quiet way, has been very supportive. I never want to embarrass him. I never want to, put him in any kind of a predicament. I also have to be true to myself, and so I try to work things through on that level. And he's got a pastoral heart. He's got a heart for the poor. He's got a heart for Jesus, and he's in a job. I mean, he's going to be 78, right? You run all these worldwide commissions and stuff like that. That's a lot on that level. And I think most of us are on the local levels, and we just kind of try to do what we got to do in our own parishes. I got off track. Sorry.
But I'm sure they don't second guess you on inviting people into the church, but is the church worried about, I don't know, what you teach that congregation?
I'm going to be a little bit of a wise guy.
Go for it.
Part of me doesn't care. Take issue. Like, all right, let's try to work this through. Like, and so every once in a while you get sniped by somebody, but like, I've never been, recently, because I don't think I say anything that's out of line. Like I really try to put out what I believe is the church teachings, but wrestle with some of the nuances of it, as opposed to just a simplistic black and white way that's going to appease this side or this side on those far extremes.
I do want to give anybody here who has a question or a short comment.
Can I get my mic on here? See if I can. Thank you both very, very much. Am I on? You're on. Okay. We spoke of Savin Hill earlier, and Rosemary Powers was there in those days. Well, she is still in Savin Hill, and she is the president of a school there, Krista Ray. It's a wonderful school. Your family must have an income at or below the poverty level in Boston to go to this school. And they're about to graduate another class. Last year's valedictorian went to Princeton University, right? And so they're doing great, they're doing amazing things, but she's got a comment, and I want to give her a chance to say something.
I do?
Yes.
I don't know what my comment is, Reverend Leach, but what I was thinking when you were asking Father Rooney some of the questions about the church, and as a Catholic myself, but not a minister in the church, what I think...
Don't discount that. Look what you're doing, right?
Okay. What I find, and I personally have probably a lot of issues with church dogma, but in my work, I'm not doing anything with dogma. I'm doing, what I think is what the Catholic Church does best, which is welcoming immigrants, educating students, helping folks again on their journey, always being positive, looking to a future, reminding kids that God loves you. There's a lot of very basic, theory or whatever we call that in the Catholic Church that's very welcoming. And I think the church is big enough that you can choose your path in there, right? I mean, I've been out on Catholic Twitter since I'm not a Catholic bureaucrat. Perhaps I am now, but I was a government bureaucrat. So of course, when I move over to take a job in a Catholic institution, I'm out on Twitter, because that's of course where you get your news. And in Catholic Twitter, you can see everyone fighting they're fighting about dogma. There's Latin Mass. I mean, there's things that as a lifelong Catholic I didn't even know that people thought about. But I choose not to do that, right? I mean, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing at Cristo Rey. At Cristo Rey, we have kids. All of them are poor. All of them are from families that are struggling. They're smart. They're hardworking. They just need the resources to get ahead in the world.
You have like 100% graduation rate, right?
100% graduation rate.
It's unbelievable. It's fantastic.
Well, there's a catch to that 100% graduation rate. You cannot graduate until you're accepted to a 4-year college. So and the minute you walk into school, I mean, you feel the Holy Spirit. I mean,
Yeah,
come on.
Cristo Rey is a real deal.
It's a great place. But we're talking about their valedictorian going to Princeton. So I want to appeal to another Princeton man back here, Vern Stanfield, who's at Fourth Presbyterian. And he's got the formula too. You got the formula, he's got the formula. He's been a great success. So I'm going to turn to him for a question or a comment.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a formula for anything.
Yeah,
But it's,
same.
and Rosemary, it's good to see you. So I'm Vern Stanfield. I'm a Protestant pastor in South Boston, and I've been there a long time. I've been there 31 years. So I have seen, and I have to think of my tense, I have seen many Catholic parishes, right, and Catholic buildings become other things.
Yeah.
And parishes close. And you mentioned the collaborations. And I swear, like just trying to do kind of clergy-wide ecumenical things every couple of years, it was a different collaboration to try to track down and who's linked with whom. And meeting tomorrow with a colleague down the street in Andrews Square, where in St. Monica's, where there's going to be another change. And I love what St. Monica's has been. And I know a lot of the folks that have been there and really feeling the hurt and frustration. So my question is really, what advice do you have for Braintree? And you may not want to give this advice, but obviously there have been a lot of parishes historically, right? And a lot of buildings and a lot of property to deal with. But while some would say the shrinkage was inevitable in South Boston, just given the changes, what advice would you have for the Archdiocese in dealing with these closings, restructuring, reconfiguring very precious communities?
Well, I don't have any advice. I have some probably opinions and observations. Like,
I'll take those.
all right.
I'll take those.
So everybody has to be fiscally responsible as best we can. But then if a place can't keep itself going, do you close it down and then just sell the assets when it's this vital place in the community? We have to take care of each other. I'm starting to look at that Saint Cecilia. We're blessed in so many ways, and how do we help others? Our parish, St. William's, closed. Never should have closed. My opinion, thriving, paid for, accessible, integrated communities, all this kind of stuff. South Boston, St. Monica, with all the closures, it's a big deal. Look at St. Brendan's and St. Anne's, what's going on there, and
What is going on at St. Brendan's?
well, it's all rumor in chat that they would possibly have to close St. Brendan Church because I don't know. It's hard that you have two vibrant communities, but if people aren't going, then the revenue's not coming in, and then you can't fix a place, and so. But I'm hoping that there are creative ways, because once the church leaves the community, it's palpable. You feel it in negative ways. But I think South Boston especially, like St. Monica's is right in the middle. It's the projects. It's that section of Southie. St. Bridges and Gady's up the other end. But like we have to be a presence in these places. But no easy.
This is just help me understand, because St. Monica's was a parish. subsidized, heavily subsidized. And I got it. And I actually had a whole lot of respect that it was being subsidized because it is the parish in South Boston that is addressing the needs of the poor. I mean, it just is. And because it's right in between the two projects and all, it was the epicenter of recovery efforts.
Yeah.
Within the last couple of years, it actually had a bunch of cash because the church it was yoked with closed, and the money from that sale for several $1 million. So I was thinking, and I think some others were thinking, oh, like now it has money, it's here to stay, and you know, it's rumors. I don't know what.
Yeah, are they thinking of closing it?
Well, that's what they're saying. Yeah, or selling it, or you know, to a developer at the top dollar and make a chapel. And so I don't know what's going on. I'm just a Protestant up the street, you know. But I do know the neighbors and the people that are just kind of disheartened. And maybe there's just a lot of mystery there. But I do want to understand.
Yeah.
And maybe that means more follow-up on my part, because I really grieve what's happening in my neighborhood.
Did you want to respond to that, John?
I think there is a grief process because, you know, when places close, especially when they're in underserved communities or, you know, addiction, recovery, and the funding isn't there, that's a huge problem. You know, in church, again, as I said earlier, we're supposed to be in the messy mix. And I'm saying this now from Saint Cecilia, you know what I mean? And, yeah.
We've mentioned Father Doc Conway several times tonight. I want to give him a chance to
Yeah.
weigh in whatever he'd like to. And I can tell he can't wait.
This guy's the real deal.
Listen to John Unni, don't listen to me, because I'm all retired, so I can say whatever I want. The advice for Chancery is let the Archbishop O'Malley go to Rome, retire, get out of here. Then take the deacons, ordain them priests, because we have a shortage. I did work in Southie because there weren't enough to go around, okay? We don't have enough priests. We have to close parishes, or more and more priests are going to end up in a hospital. They're running 2 and 3 parishes. It's ridiculous. You need a parish to take care of the poor? Every parish should be taking care of the poor. That's our job. That's what Jesus told us to do, right? That's what John Unni's parish does. And he helps the poor in Dorchester.
Yeah, but you know, I feel like I just listening to you, because I know you walk your talk, and I'm listening to you, Brent, like I'm thinking, like, do we do it enough? And we're involved, but like, are we doing it enough? You know, we just did a major renovation. It's a beautiful place now, and I don't know, you're right.
And the other thing we're facing, and nobody wants to talk about it, is the size of families. We don't have weddings anymore. We have tons of funerals. Very few weddings, almost none, and a very small number of baptisms. I'm one of 6 kids from Rosendale.
Me too.
From Rosie? I thought there was something
No.
good about you.
But one of 6.
Okay. Now I look at your family as I look at my family. My brother Jim has 6 kids. None of his kids, all married. Most of them have 2 kids. One of them has 3. 2 of them have 3 kids. That's the size of families today. The number of kids is cut in half. The Boston School Department is suffering from a lack of kids. Families are so much smaller. Look at the housing we build. I'm going to shut up right now, okay? I know you're going to grab it. But you look at the apartments that are going up all over the city of Boston. They're not for families. You know, 1 or 2 bedrooms. That's it. There's no more family buildings anymore because there are no more families. Everybody's talking to their dog.
That is Father Doc Conway. And we will not give him back the mic tonight. We have a question from a parishioner here at Church on the Hill. Thank you, Louis.
John 16 says, be led by the Spirit. And it also says that when you pray, Jesus said, don't pray to me, pray to the Spirit. And he will guide you because of what I tell him. And that's all I got to say.
I love it.
We don't have no problem changing this.
All right.
Okay. I'm
Spirit.
looking at other people who might have a question. Kevin, you got something on your mind?
Do I have something on my mind?
Yeah. That you want to share or ask about?
If you were to look back over 19 years at Saint Cecilia's, is there a particular ministry or a particular moment that you would really say is, we'll say, the extra sparkly gem in the crown of what you've done at Saint Cecilia's? I'd be interested to know that.
Kevin, I think first, welcoming the Jesuit Urban Center over did something. It started to take away any fears, and it's just like people said, you have an agenda. You know, this side, they were all like, he's sniping. You know, they do this anonymously online and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, what? And I wanted to respond to people. I didn't even. People were like, look what they write. I was like. And they're like, don't respond, they're not interested. Those are all fake names, pseudonyms, you know, and all this kind of stuff. One guy's name was Joe Sacerdo, and I thought, why is this Italian guy, you know, going after me, you know? And then a friend said, dummy. Sacerdo is Latin for sacerdote, priest, so it's Joe Priest, you know what I mean? Remember Joe the plumber? And I was like, oh, so people, they didn't have the courage to come out and just say, hey, I'm taking issue with this, whatever. But when you emerge from that, without your own agenda, like I wasn't trying to drive my own agenda, and I know it sounds corny but inconvenient, but so if there's any agenda, I hope it's the Jesus, the Spirit agenda, you know? That you just meet people where they're at, welcome, not changing church teaching. So that did something, it opened, and then that propels you forward with other issues into a way of being. So it's like you're not fear-based or squashed by fears. So those are some things that happen there.
That's a terrific question and a terrific answer, and I've wondered about that too. If bringing that group in was a turning point, and you're saying it was.
And I didn't know what I was doing. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just responding like naturally of the Spirit, you know.
But the signal that it was being sent was, come on in, as you are, you're welcome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great signal, and you feel it there now. You feel it there now.
Thanks.
David Searles is a pastor in East Boston, and he's been doing tremendous work about safety in the Boston public schools. And he's got something on his mind. I'm not sure what it is.
My apologies for being a bit late. We've got, we have to swim across the harbor to get here. But in concert with what other folks are saying, what I found in East Boston increasingly is the parish priests are so limited in their time that they're caring simply for their flock as best they can and don't have much time and capacity beyond the ministry within the church. So when I've endeavored to kind of connect with some of the local parish priests, they just don't have the capacity. And it seems like that's a limitation increasingly across the city in terms of involvement. And as Reverend Collins said, that we're trying to do some work in terms of safety in the schools. And again, to reach out with clergy across the city and that don't have the capacity to take on another thing really limits, I think, the ministry throughout the city. So I don't know if you have any comments about that.
Well, it's like what Doc Conway was just saying, you know, some guys will have 2 and 3 parishes, and so you're just so, and that's not the case for me, but you're so spread out, and then guys are getting sick, or they're saying like, I'm done. Never mind, you know, reaching out to community causes that are so important, you know. I'm blessed, you know, to be affiliated with Pine Street, Jim O'Connell, the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, you know, just really great orgs that kind of pull me out of the parish, but it's not exclusive of the parish. The parish is here, and like, so that's how these ministries all seem to dovetail, which that has been a great gift to be able to do that. What I feel like I've fallen short on is, you know, like I said about Nancy Taylor, you know, ecumenical connecting with other ministers.
Yeah.
Except for Colin Leach, who just, hey, I'm coming in, I'm coming over, and you're gonna do this.
Well, listen, I don't want to cut anybody off. I've got First of all, did anybody catch early on in his biography that there was a woman involved? Did you hear that? Right, when he was teaching, did you hear that, Stephen? There was a woman involved. Back when you were teaching over at Columbus High School, there was a girlfriend. And people want to know what happened to the woman.
Get out of here.
Right?
Is she here
We
tonight?
hope she's had a great life.
You know what? She has. She's a beautiful soul person, friend. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're still in touch with her?
Married, kids, beautiful. Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. See, what I'm gonna go out on a limb here and try to put words to his formula. They're my words. I'm a Protestant, obviously. But what John offers is rootedness, okay, in Saint Cecilia's identity. You're a Roman Catholic. And this radical inclusivity. You put those two things together, and suddenly you got a full house. All right? People know who they are, they know why they're there, but they also know that whoever they are, they're welcome there. Would you agree with that?
And then you walk together. You don't have it all figured out, but we go forward together. And the word radical, this is the Old English major coming out, it comes from Latin radix, which means root. So somebody who's radical isn't necessarily a fringe fanatic. Somebody who's truly radical is rooted. Jesus was radical because he brought the religion, and he was a Jew. He brought it back to its root. And when he challenged those lawyers, those rule followers, to say, it's not just about the rules, don't throw them out, but it's about the spirit, that was radical. And so when you say radical inclusivity, it's just that. It's not anything new. It's not anything like, it's just like, let's get back to the root of how he was. And then from there, like the woman at the well, when we get in adultery, like the people that were going left and right, you walk together and you grow in what he was doing. So that's kind of the spirit of it all.
Right.
Ethos.
Something's going on. I guess we're concluding here. I have a question. You know, that was a great service for Catherine White. Can you believe it was 5 years ago, 2017?
Loved it.
And a
It was
beautiful eulogy. But in that eulogy, you quoted Catherine White as saying to you,
Oh my God! What do you have a brain like that's?
you better, she said to you, John, you better be right.
Yes.
Do you remember her saying that?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
How do you
In fact,
remember this?
Listen, and you probably didn't even know I was there.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Better be right about what? Carl?
Well, you're getting ahead of the story. That's the question. First of all, John, were you right? Whoa! And what was it that she was asking you to be right about?
You ready?
Yeah.
I believe there is something after the last breath, right? Hook, line, and sinker. I may wrestle with, what's that teaching mean? Or why is that rule there? I am a believer. There's a line from Jesus, and I think I told this to Catherine. I loved her. We would have these conversations, and I said, listen, we can wrestle with all kinds of church stuff. We can have our philosophical questions, our existential questions. I go right to the gospel where Jesus says, and this is my only interpretation, so this is not like, how it's written in the Bible. Jesus is there, and he says something like, listen, chill out. He doesn't say that, but like, he says, do not let your hearts be troubled. What? Listen, you guys are believers. You have faith in God. I want you to have faith also in me. For in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. And here's the line. He says, and if there weren't, are you kidding me? Do you think I would have told you that I was going to go and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, know this. I'll come back again. I'll take you with me so that where I am, you may be. You know the way. And I left that with Catherine. I'm like, so that to me, I believe in Jesus. I believe he said that stuff. Forget all the rules, regulations for now. That is coming from the founder, CEO. I believe that. And then the next line is Thomas comes in. And there's a Thomas in every single one of us. The doubter, the wanderer. Is there, what happens if there's nothing, all this kind of stuff? And he goes, Master, what are you talking about? We don't know. What are you even talking about? We don't know where you're going. We don't know the way. And then he looks and he dials down and he goes, I am the way and the truth and the life. And I'm going to tell you, that is not Jesus at the pearly gates like a bouncer. I'm the way, the truth, and life, and nobody gets to the Father except through me, you know? That's him saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, the truth and life. Take the conjugation I am. It comes from what infinitive verb? To be, right? To be. My amness, my way of being is the way, the truth, and the life. And that's what, quote unquote, to use this language, gets us into heaven. And how was he? He took care of people. He loved people. Radically included people. He fed people. He healed. He redeemed. All of this stuff. That's how we're called to be. That's the quote unquote way into heaven. And so I believe those words. I said that, not all of it, to Catherine. I probably did. And you know, when I talked about this, I said there is something more. I'm betting my life on it. You know, otherwise I'm in the wrong business. But you know, I don't know. What do you think? I think there's something, right?
You know, and you know, everybody in that church was thinking to themselves, when my time comes, I hope I have a priest like John Unni. That's what they were thinking, Chris. It was a beautiful moment.
I was going to say yes, Catherine. There is a.
Yes, there is. Do we have any more questions? Yes, Jerry, for goodness sakes, speak up. You.
At least one and Captain White Stream who didn't think that.
What's that?
I was there.
Uh-huh.
And my thought was, Jesus, I hope that the priest like Father John when I.
You didn't think that? Okay, very good. This is the guy who went to
Columbus.
Columbus, right? Okay. I'm Colin Leach. This is the Church on the Hill. We have been so blessed to have Father John Unni here today to speak to Christopher Lydon. And we hope to continue this with another clergy person in June, and we'll be in touch with you about that. But could we have a round of applause for these two people?
Thank you guys for spending your evening at the Christmas. This was a pleasure.
But
Such a pleasure.
we
Thank you.
finally got a chance to hear John preach in the last 2 minutes, right?
Sorry.
No,
There's no collection, though. There won't be a collection.
It was absolutely wonderful. And you can get his sermons online, and they are worth listening to. So thank you all very much. We do have some refreshments. God bless you for coming. Get home safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin.
John,
Hold on. This is great.
Thank you. We'll do this again.